A tycoon pretended to sleep to test loyalty. Maid's daughter failed no one. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. In the heart of a sprawling mansion, under the gleam of chandeliers that lit the grand hall with an almost magical glow, a scene of power and privilege unfolded. The wealthy tycoon, Richard Whitmore, stood at the center of it all, the embodiment of success. With a portfolio that stretched across industries, from tech to real estate, he was known for his strategic mind and ruthless ambition. But today, he was testing something far more valuable to him than money or power: loyalty. Whitmore had invited his staff to an elaborate dinner, a lavish affair that only the richest could afford. The long dining table gleamed with polished silverware, and the air was filled with the scent of expensive perfumes and fresh roses. Amidst the sparkling glasses of champagne and the laughter of the elite, there stood Maria, the daughter of the housekeeper. Dressed in a simple uniform, she blended into the background, as she always did. At just 14 years old, Maria had known nothing but servitude her entire life. Raised in the shadows of wealth, she was used to the cold silence of the grand hallways and the whispered conversations that never included her. But she was proud of her mother, who had worked for the Whitmore family for years, and Maria did her part quietly, helping wherever she was needed. But today was different. Today, Richard Whitmore had a plan. He was going to test the loyalty of his employees, but not just any employee, Maria. The room was alive with conversation, but a subtle tension hung in the air. Unbeknownst to Maria, Whitmore had decided to pretend to fall asleep during the dinner, a masterstroke of strategy, or so he thought. He wanted to see who would react, who would speak freely, who would show their true colors, and most importantly, would anyone be loyal enough to protect the Whitmore name, even in his absence? As the evening wore on, the guests continued to indulge in fine wine and delicious delicacies, but Maria stayed silent in the corner, keeping her head down, just as she had been taught. However, she couldn't help but notice the odd behavior of the man at the head of the table. Richard Whitmore, who was normally confident and commanding, had suddenly slumped in his chair, his eyes closed as if in deep sleep. The guests, who had been engaged in polite chatter, now seemed unsure of how to proceed. Maria's heart raced as she wondered what was happening. Was he truly asleep, or was he testing them all? She stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. She had always respected the Whitmore family, but now, in this moment, she had a choice to make. Should she speak up? Should she act? Little did she know, this simple moment of hesitation would change everything. The evening had stretched on, and the dinner party was still in full swing, the room alive with laughter and conversation. But Maria could feel a strange tension in the air as she carefully observed the guests. The tycoon, Richard Whitmore, who had been so vibrant and commanding only moments ago, now appeared to be deep in slumber. His eyes were closed, his head slightly tilted back, and his breathing slow and steady, almost too perfect. Maria had been trained to remain invisible, to blend in with the background, and to never draw attention to herself. Yet, tonight, something was different. The usual dull hum of idle chatter seemed to grow louder, the laughter ringing in her ears. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, unsure of what to do. She had never seen Whitmore act this way before. Was he truly asleep, or was he watching? Was he testing everyone? The question gnawed at her, stirring something deep inside her. The guests continued to speak, their voices tinged with discomfort, unsure how to act. Some exchanged uncertain glances, while others attempted to continue their conversations, but there was an undercurrent of unease. The air felt heavy, thick with anticipation. Maria couldn't help but notice the way the room shifted, how the atmosphere had subtly changed since Whitmore had closed his eyes. No one dared to make a move. No one dared to speak too freely. The silence was almost oppressive, and Maria, caught in the moment, felt her heart race. She knew she couldn't just stand there forever, but she was torn. As the daughter of the housekeeper, she was used to being a part of the background, never the focus of anyone's attention. But now, The power dynamics in the room had shifted. The guests were acting differently, almost as though they feared making a wrong move in the presence of the Tycoon. Then, unexpectedly, a soft voice broke the stillness. One of the guests, a young man who had been talking animatedly just moments ago, now hesitated and spoke in a low, cautious tone. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" His words were innocent enough, but they echoed in the silence, drawing the attention of the room. Maria felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what was happening. Whitmore had designed this situation, had orchestrated this moment of vulnerability, all to test his staff, his guests, and their loyalty. He was no longer the imposing Tycoon at the head of the table. He had become a silent observer, the one who controlled the room from his seemingly restful state. Maria could feel the weight of that control pressing down on her, making her feel more invisible than ever before. But she couldn't back down. She had already been caught in the act of hesitation. It was too late to go back now. She had to decide. Would she remain silent, as she had been taught, or would she speak up and face whatever consequences lay ahead? The room seemed to hold its breath as the young man's words lingered in the air. The stakes were higher than Maria could have imagined, and in that moment, everything felt like it was hanging by a thread. Her loyalty, her place in this world, and her mother's job, all of it was on the line. But what was loyalty? Was it about just following orders? Or was it about something deeper, something more personal? Maria took a deep breath, her thoughts racing. She had never been the one to rock the boat, but tonight felt different. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, even though no one had turned to look. In that instant, she knew that this moment, this quiet test of loyalty, would change everything. The silence in the room stretched on, and Maria's heart pounded in her chest. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, as though the entire room was holding its breath. She knew that this was not just a test of loyalty, it was a test of her very character. The question was no longer whether she could remain invisible, but whether she would stand up for herself, her mother, and the life they had built in the shadows of the Whitmore empire. The young man who had spoken earlier now shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his voice barely a whisper. "I think we've all been a little too quiet," he muttered, looking nervously at the others. "But what do we do now?" His words seemed to snap everyone out of their trance, and for the first time since Whitmore had fallen asleep, the guests started to speak freely. There was a palpable shift in the air, as though they were all waiting for something, someone, to make a move. Maria could feel her legs trembling beneath her, but she couldn't look away from the scene unfolding in front of her. Whitmore, still pretending to sleep, seemed to be waiting for the same thing. His breath was steady, his expression unreadable, and yet, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that he was more awake than anyone in the room. She knew he was watching, waiting for one of them to crack. But it wasn't just about cracking under pressure, it was about revealing what lay beneath the surface. Loyalty was a delicate thing, Maria realized. It wasn't simply about following orders without question. It was about trust, respect, and knowing when to speak up and when to remain silent. And for her, in that moment, remaining silent felt like a betrayal. As the tension in the room mounted, Maria's gaze fell on Whitmore's still form at the head of the table. The Tycoon's life had been built on wealth, power, and control, but tonight, he had placed his trust, or perhaps his bet, on the loyalty of the people around him. Did they see him as a leader, or did they see him as an obstacle to be overcome? Did he see them as pawns, or as allies? Maria's thoughts raced. She knew the answer at least for herself. She had been invisible for so long, always just another face in the background. But she was more than that. She had more to offer than just being a servant. She was capable, intelligent, and yes, loyal. But loyalty wasn't blind. And it wasn't about following someone just because they were powerful. Loyalty was earned, not given freely. The room fell silent once again as the guests waited for Maria to make her move. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her, even though no one dared to look directly at her. They were waiting for her to say something, to break the silence. But what could she say? What would make a difference in this moment? In the stillness, she made her decision. Without hesitation, Maria stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "If you think we're all here to obey without question, you're wrong," she said, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "We may be your employees, but we are not your servants. We deserve respect, just like you do." and I will not stand by while you test us like this." Her words echoed in the grand hall, and for a moment, the entire room was still. No one knew how to respond. And then, in the silence, a soft but unmistakable sound broke the air, the sound of Whitmore's laughter. It wasn't a loud, mocking laugh. It was quiet, almost amused, as though he had been expecting this. Maria looked up at him, her heart racing, and saw that his eyes were open now, watching her intently. Well, he said, his voice rich with amusement. "It seems we have a lot more to discuss, don't we?" Maria's breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her. This had all been a test she had passed. She had spoken up, and she had earned his respect, not by obeying his unspoken orders, but by standing her ground. The room remained silent for a moment, as everyone processed Maria's words. The tension that had built over the evening seemed to dissipate, replaced by an undeniable shift in power. Richard Whitmore, still seated at the head of the table, regarded her with a look of both admiration and something else, perhaps surprise. For a brief second, Maria wondered if she had gone too far. But as she stood there, holding her ground, something inside her told her it was the right choice. Whitmore's eyes gleamed, his sharp features momentarily softening. His lips curled into a smile, though it wasn't one of mockery. He was impressed, genuinely so. "You have more courage than most, Maria," he said, his voice steady, but with an undertone of something like respect. "You've passed my test, but what happens next is entirely up to you." Maria could feel the eyes of the room on her now, all the guests watching, waiting for her next move. The silence that had once been oppressive now felt heavy with possibility. She could feel the weight of their expectations, but more than that, she could feel the weight of her own. This was a pivotal moment in her life. Her mother had worked for the Whitmore family for years, serving them loyally, silently, always in the background. But Maria had never been content to live in the shadows. She had dreams, ambitions that stretched far beyond the confines of this mansion. She had always known that one day, she would have to break free of this life, but she never imagined it would come like this. Whitmore's test had been harsh, but it had opened a door, and Maria was not about to walk away from it. "What happens next?" she repeated, her voice steady. "I want to know what you expect from me, and why this test even mattered." Whitmore leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished table, his gaze fixed on Maria. "I've built an empire, Maria. And empires are not just built on money and power. They're built on loyalty, true loyalty, the kind that can withstand any trial." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. "I wanted to see if you had that loyalty. Not just to me, but to the principles I've built this family on." Maria listened closely, trying to understand the meaning behind his words. Loyalty. She had always thought of it as something one owed to those who took care of them, those who provided for them. But now, she was beginning to see it differently. Loyalty was not about blind obedience. It was about trust, respect, and recognizing when to stand up for what was right. "So what now?" she asked again, this time with a firmness, in her voice that matched Whitmore's. He smiled again, this time with a knowing look in his eyes. "Now, you have a choice," he said. "You can continue to work for this family, as you have. Or, you can take your place beside me. You've earned my respect, Maria, and I'm offering you a chance to step out of the shadows." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had always dreamed of a life beyond this, but never had she imagined it would be so close, so within reach. She had always admired Whitmore's power, his strength, but now she realized that what he had built was not just about wealth. It was about influence, vision, and yes, loyalty. But was she ready for this? Was she ready to step into the world she had always been on the outside of? The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her chest. She looked around the room, at the guests, the employees, all of them waiting for her to make a choice. And in that moment, she knew that her life, the life she had always wanted, was no longer a distant dream. It was here, in front of her, waiting to be claimed. And for the first time, Maria felt a surge of confidence. She didn't need to remain in the shadows anymore. She could choose her path. And so she did. Maria stood there, her heart racing as she processed Whitmore's offer. It felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet. Everything she had known, every moment spent working quietly in the shadows, now seemed like it was in the past. She had always wondered if there was more to life than what she had been given, But never once had she thought that this moment would come so suddenly, so unexpectedly. Whitmore, the powerful billionaire, had offered her a chance to step out of the background and into the light. A chance to prove that she was more than just the daughter of the housekeeper. The decision felt monumental. Maria took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of thoughts rushing through her mind. She had always worked hard, always done her best to stay out of trouble and earn her place. But this was something entirely different. She was being given power, influence, and a chance to change her life. But was she ready for it? Would she be able to live up to Whitmore's expectations? As she thought about her mother, who had worked tirelessly for the Whitmore family for years, Maria realized that this decision wasn't just about her. It was about the future she wanted to create, not only for herself, but for her mother as well. Maria had watched her mother endure countless sacrifices, never once complaining, always doing what was necessary to keep their small world intact. Now, it was Maria's turn to decide what kind of life she wanted to build. Her mother had always told her that the only thing she could control in life was her choices. And this was the moment that would define everything. "I'll take the opportunity," Maria finally said, her voice steady and clear. "I've worked my whole life to get to this point. I won't let it pass me by." Whitmore's smile widened, a look of approval crossing his features. He had been waiting for her answer, and when it came, it was just as he had hoped. He knew that Maria had the potential to rise above her circumstances, to be more than just a servant. "Good," he said, his voice warm with encouragement. "I knew you had it in you." He stood up from his chair and walked over to where Maria stood. The others in the room watched in silence, all eyes on the exchange. This was no longer just a test of loyalty. It had become something much more. Whitmore placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "You're not just going to work for me," he continued. "You're going to be part of this family, and you're going to help me take this empire to new heights." Maria looked up at him, feeling a rush of emotions. This was what she had always dreamed of, but it felt different now, more real, more urgent. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't let you down." As she spoke those words, she knew that her life would never be the same again. She had made her choice, and now she would have to prove herself in ways she had never imagined. But she was ready. Maria was determined to take this opportunity and run with it, to show the world, and herself, that she was capable of so much more than anyone had ever expected. She had been tested, and she had passed. Now, it was time for her to rise up and claim her place in the world. As the days passed, Maria found herself adjusting to her new role within the Whitmore empire. She was no longer the shy, quiet daughter of the housekeeper. Instead, she had become an integral part of the team, working alongside the brightest minds in the business world. Whitmore's expectations were high, but Maria was determined to meet them. She poured herself into her work, learning the ins and outs of the company, attending meetings, and contributing ideas that made even the seasoned executives take notice. At first, the transition was challenging. Maria had always worked in the background, and now, she was at the forefront, with all eyes on her. There were moments of self-doubt, times when she wondered if she truly belonged in this world of wealth and power. But every time she questioned herself, she remembered the decision she had made, the promise she had given to Whitmore and herself. Slowly but surely, Maria began to earn the respect of those around her. Her ideas were sharp, her insights valuable. It wasn't long before she found herself sitting at the same table as Whitmore, discussing strategies for expanding the empire. The once intimidating Tycoon had become a mentor of sorts, pushing her to think bigger, to dream beyond the limits of what she had known. And as much as she admired him, Maria began to realize that she had her own vision, one that was uniquely hers. One day, during a meeting with the board of directors, Whitmore turned to Maria with a smile. "You've been doing great work, Maria," he said, his voice warm with approval. "I've been thinking, it's time for you to take on a bigger project. There's a new initiative we're launching, and I want you to lead it." Maria's heart raced. This was the moment she had been waiting for, a chance to prove herself on an even bigger stage. She had been given opportunities before, but this was different. This was the moment she would truly make her mark. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility, but also the excitement of what lay ahead. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. Whitmore's smile widened. "I knew you would be." With that, Maria began to oversee the new project, a major expansion into international markets. She worked tirelessly, pouring all of her energy into ensuring its success. The project wasn't easy, and there were times when things didn't go as planned. But Maria's determination never wavered. She learned from her mistakes, adjusted her approach, and kept pushing forward. As the months passed, the project began to show results. The company's profits soared, and Whitmore's confidence in Maria grew. She had done it. She had proven herself not only to him, but to everyone who had ever doubted her. But more importantly, she had proven something to herself. She had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, and she wasn't going back. Yet, even with her success, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to prove. She wasn't content to simply be a part of Whitmore's empire. She had her own vision, her own dreams. And as the Tycoon's empire continued to grow, so did her own aspirations. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Maria knew that she was ready for whatever came next. As Maria's project continued to thrive, she began to see the impact of her work not just on the company's bottom line, but on herself. She had become more than just a part of the team. She had become a force within the company, with the kind of influence she had never imagined possible. Whitmore, who had once been her mentor, now treated her as an equal. He trusted her judgment, valued her insights, and even began to rely on her for decisions that were once reserved for the highest levels of leadership. But despite her growing success, Maria felt a gnawing unease. She had worked tirelessly, proven herself again and again, but there was still a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that she was being held back. The company had grown, the empire had expanded, but there was something about it that felt incomplete to her. She wanted more. She had always known that there was a world beyond the walls of Whitmore's empire, a world where she could create something of her own. As her thoughts swirled, Maria found herself in Whitmore's office one late evening, after the workday had ended. She had made it a habit to visit him after hours, a chance for them to discuss the company's future and her own aspirations. She entered his office and found him sitting at his desk, reviewing financial reports. He looked up when she walked in, offering her a smile. "You've been doing excellent work, Maria," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I'm impressed. You've really proven yourself." Maria nodded, but didn't respond right away. She had been wrestling with her thoughts all evening, and now was the time to finally speak up. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "But I need to talk to you about something. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about my future. I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I don't want to be limited by this company. I have my own dreams, my own vision for what I can accomplish." Whitmore's expression shifted, though his eyes remained warm. "You've already accomplished more than most people ever will, Maria," he said. "But I understand. You want something more." Maria's heart pounded as she looked at him, knowing that this moment could change everything. "Yes," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I want to start my own venture. I've learned so much from you, from this company, but I can't ignore the pull inside me to create something of my own. I want to build my own legacy." There was a brief silence as Whitmore studied her, his gaze thoughtful. Finally, he nodded. "I knew this day would come. You've always had that fire in you, Maria, and I respect that." He stood up from his desk and walked over to the window, looking out over the city skyline. "You've done incredible work here, but I can't hold you back. If you're truly ready to take the next step, then I'm with you. You've earned that right." Maria's chest tightened as she absorbed his words. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The moment she would break free and chase her own dreams. But even as excitement surged within her, she knew that this was just the beginning. She would need to take risks, face challenges, and prove herself once again. But for the first time in her life, Maria was ready to step into the unknown. She had built her foundation with the Whitmore empire, and now it was time to build her own. She took a deep breath and smiled. "Thank you, Richard, for everything. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning." Whitmore turned to face her, a proud smile on his face. "I believe in you, Maria. Go make your mark on the world." As Maria left his office that night, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, she had the confidence to walk it. The empire she had helped build had given her the tools she needed to forge her own path. And now, she was ready to do just that. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Maria. She had made her decision, and now the process of building her own legacy had begun. Richard Whitmore had given her the confidence to step out of his shadow, and she was determined to make the most of it. The world outside the walls of the Whitmore empire was daunting, but Maria felt a renewed sense of purpose. With a few key contacts and the wealth of knowledge she had gained working alongside Whitmore, she set out to launch her own business. At first, it wasn't easy. She faced the usual challenges that come with starting something new. There were sleepless nights, doubts about her capabilities, and moments when she wondered if she had made the right decision. But Maria refused to give up. She knew what was at stake, not just her future, but her mother's as well. She had watched her mother give everything for a life that never quite seemed to change, and now Maria was determined to build a future where she could give her mother everything she had worked so hard for. The business started small, but Maria had always believed in the power of hard work and dedication. Slowly but surely, things began to fall into place. She secured her first few clients, hired a small team, and began to see the fruits of her labor. It wasn't long before her reputation started to grow. Word of her innovative ideas and relentless work ethic spread, and soon she was meeting with investors who were interested in supporting her vision. Yet, even with the success she was experiencing, Maria knew there was still so much more to accomplish. She wasn't content to simply be successful. She wanted to create something that would leave a lasting impact. As her company grew, so did her ambitions. She began looking at larger projects, ones that would challenge her in new ways. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. But those moments were fleeting. Maria had learned from Whitmore that success was never handed to anyone. It was earned through grit and determination, and she had plenty of both. One evening, after another successful business meeting, Maria found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had started as a maid's daughter, invisible to the world around her, and now she was running her own company. Her mother, who had always believed in her, was now working alongside her, proud of the woman Maria had become. Maria had promised herself that she would never forget her roots, and she hadn't. The company she had built wasn't just about making money. It was about making a difference. She wanted to give back to the community that had supported her, to help others achieve their own dreams, just as she had. As Maria sat in her office, looking out over the city skyline, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had faced the challenges, overcome the doubts, and emerged stronger for it. But there was still more to do. She wasn't finished yet. Her vision for the future was clear, and nothing was going to stop her from achieving it. As she picked up the phone to call a potential new client, Maria realized that this was only the beginning of the journey. The empire she had built, the legacy she was creating, it was just starting to take shape. And for the first time, Maria was excited about what the future would hold. Months had passed, and Maria's company had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. Her team was expanding, her brand was becoming recognized, and the impact of her work was undeniable. She had achieved what once seemed impossible. She had built a thriving business from the ground up. But as successful as she was, Maria knew that the journey had only just begun. She had proved to herself and to the world that she could achieve greatness, but now it was time to turn her focus to something bigger. She wanted to make a lasting impact, not just in business, but in the lives of the people around her. Maria's success was no longer just about the profits or the recognition. It was about giving back to the community that had helped shape her. She wanted to inspire others, especially those who had been overlooked and underestimated, just as she once had been. The foundation she created to support young entrepreneurs was thriving. Through it, she was able to mentor and guide others, providing them with the opportunities that she had once only dreamed of. She spent countless hours helping them navigate the challenges of starting a business, offering the same support and encouragement she had received from Richard Whitmore all those years ago. One evening, as she sat in her office, Maria reflected on the path she had taken. She had come so far, but there was still so much left to accomplish. The fire inside her had never burned brighter. The idea of helping others rise, of creating a legacy that extended beyond financial success, was what kept her moving forward. But Maria was not just building an empire. She was building a community. She wanted to prove that true success was not about wealth alone. It was about the difference you made in the world. As she looked out the window, Maria thought back to the moment when she had stood in front of Whitmore and declared that she wanted to build something of her own. That moment had changed everything. It had given her the courage to step out of the shadows and take control of her own destiny. And now, with the business thriving and the foundation growing, Maria knew that she had made the right decision. She had followed her heart, worked tirelessly, and never gave up. And in the process, she had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed. With the support of her mother, her team, and the people she had mentored, Maria felt ready for whatever the future held. She was no longer just the daughter of the housekeeper. She was a business leader, a mentor, and a woman with a vision for a brighter future. As she continued to expand her company and her foundation, Maria knew that the legacy she was building would last far beyond her own lifetime. It wasn't just about creating wealth. It was about creating opportunities for others to achieve their dreams. And in doing so, Maria had found a success that was more meaningful than anything money could buy.